Okay, welcome everyone to the ProcessGold 18 release webinar. My name is Martijn and I'm joined today by Ruud and Jasper to tell you everything about the new ProcessGold 18 release. Ruud will be showing you the new performance upgrades in our ProcessGold 18 software and tell you a bit more about what we did to achieve those upgrades. And Jasper will be showing you the new things in application 1. So we'll start with the new ProcessGold 18 release. We'll look at the performance and some other features. Then we'll tell you a bit more about what you can do to improve the performance of your apps. We have several new things in the ProcessGold Academy. We'll briefly look at what's coming up in the future, and we have a short news section. At the end, there's an opportunity to, there we'll answer your questions. If you have any questions or remarks, we love to hear those, and use the GoToWebinar chat box to ask us any questions. If you chat in there, only we will see it, nobody else will. So you can, you can really ask us anything here. And please do it during the webinar, and we'll either answer your questions at that moment or at the end of the webinar. The webinar will take about 30 minutes, and there will be a video recording available afterwards that you can send to all of your colleagues. So today it's the 19th of September. Our release candidate is just uploaded to our servers, so if you can't wait to get started with ProcessGold 18, you can already get the release candidate from our servers. In 2 weeks, we'll have the final release ready, and we did all the latest bug fixes and tweaks. But if you can't wait to get started, you can already pick up the release candidate from our servers. So let's look into the ProcessGold 18 release. As most of you know, for ProcessGold 17, we started our performance initiative. We made a profiler feature to allow you to find performance bottlenecks in your apps. And we made the first set of performance improvements. And for ProcessGold 18, we really took that to the next level. And I would like to ask you, Ruud, to tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, thank you, Martijn. Well, let's just get started with the numbers. And I'll be showing you a comparison between our last two releases. So that's ProcessGold 16 and 17 compared to the new release of ProcessGold 18. And we've split these down into a few of our major components. So this is the process graph, the bar charts, the list charts, the line charts, and general filter controls. And you'll be seeing basically the bare bones performance here. So if you have specific additional features you've built on top of these, your performance may differ with actual numbers here. So these might reflect a bit faster times than what you will actually see in your actual application, but you will definitely significant improvements. So first off, for the process graph, we've actually made some really big improvements. If you look at ProcessGold 16, we already cut the time down in half in ProcessGold 17. And afterwards in ProcessGold 18, it's even down further, again by half. So this is about 25% of the time left. We made similar improvements with the bar chart. They are also way faster. And the list and line charts, they're a bit different. So the list charts, we made a big improvement in 17 already, and we didn't do anything else in 18 for those. However, for the line charts, we didn't make any improvements yet, but in ProcessGold 18, you can expect to see those improvements. And then finally, the biggest improvement here we've had as well was on the filter controls. We didn't do anything in 17 yet, but in 18, these have seen some significant improvements, and you will surely notice those in your application if you're using filters. So to give you an example of how we actually improve the speed, and in this case, for the process graph, generally it comes down to smart caching and IO efficient memory access for your large data sets. To give you an example, when we visualize a process graph, we generally start from a set of events. We sort those, filter those before visualizing them. And what we actually did is we in ProcessGold 18 actually cache this sorting now. So when your end users are using your application, they no longer have to do any sorting on your data unless this is really necessary, which of course improves the speed of your application. Secondly, there's memory access, and this is a bit more technical, but these can really give you a lot of performance improvements. If you have events and you have 3 different cases, these might be in a certain order. And if we, for example, first look at the first case, then what you'll see is you'll actually get a bit of the third case with it, essentially, which is not needed yet. So we actually throw that away. And we look at the second case, and you actually, again, fetch a bit of the first case, which isn't needed. And lastly, actually, you get the same with the third case. And of course, if you look at these, you actually see that there's a lot of red here, which isn't needed. And if you do this in the right order, you actually get a lot of speed improvements. And that is actually what you're seeing in ProcessGold 18. Of course, sadly, we didn't make everything instantaneous. There still might be some waiting, but in ProcessGold 18, you can actually make this a lot more enjoyable for your end users. So when people see a loading screen, generally if they have something to read or are entertained by some messages, they're actually more engaged with the waiting and actually don't feel like the wait is that long. So in ProcessGold 18, you can actually customize and set loading messages for your end users if you want to. Okay, then I will hand over the floor to Jasper, who's going to tell you a bit more about the features they've been working on.
Yes, thank you, Ruud. Just as a software team on the solutions team, we have been working hard on improving the performance of application one, App One. To get all those benefits, yeah, please use the latest release, which you can find on our server. We really changed a lot of things in there, and most of the things are too specific to mention. So please use this release, and otherwise, if you have questions on your app, ask our friends at support. But I can show you also some features we did, and I will show you this actually in the application. So as Ruud already stated, we have now the option to use loading messages, and we already implemented those in app one. So if you now open your app as an end user, you can actually see messages down here. And as you now see, it's now stating a message about favorites. So in app one, we both entered messages which were like funny to enhance the waiting experience, but also like useful tips, which the end users can actually help. The second feature we did is about hints in the process graph. So as you may have all seen on process graph, we have quite an extensive hint if you hover over activities and hover over edges. And not all of this input in there is relevant for each process graph. As you can see, there are also a lot of calculations in there. And as you might have already figured, it takes time to calculate all those calculations, especially the median. So what we now did in 18, we switched all our process graph hints to simple, such that you only see the relevant context metric. So and now it's set to a number of cases, also for the edges. This looks a lot simpler, so it makes it also easier to understand. And with this, with our metric selector, you can actually change the metric still. You see switches as well. So this is a lot faster for all, yeah, in performance. We changed this for all our process graphs. So also if you go to, for example, compare, or you have like special graphs, you still see like, oh yes, we now also show the color, and this, yeah, it looks nicer than we had before.
Yeah, and it's not only faster for showing this hint, but it's also faster for calculating the whole process graph to put it on screen.
Yeah, so this was one of the reasons why the process graph improved so much. And it's a very simple way to turn it on. So if I do it over here, I can actually go to my advanced menu for process graph. And at the bottom, we have for activities and edges, we have a hint. And if we just set it to simple, we already have the simple hint. So all the, yeah, as I already mentioned, all the app one process graphs now have the simple hint. If you have an application where it's still relevant to show the big hint, you can of course turn it back on, but please be noted that this comes at a cost for performance. The second thing we did in app 1, it's a bit continuing on this work over here, and it's about the metric selection in the process graph. As it has been for quite a while, we had this menu in our process graphs, and it looks a bit weird if you compare it to the rest of our interface. Because on a normal bar chart or a line chart, we have like a combo box as a metric selector. So we actually made it, oh, let's not make a selection. So in PG18, we actually made it possible to also have this combo box as a selector. The plus of doing this is that for end users, it's way better visible what your metric is on which you're filtering. And it also interacts the same way as our other charts do. So as you can see, I can change it now, and I see that's now on percentage, and it's also stated at the top. So this is actually a bit of improving the consistency of our interface. If you want to turn this on in your application, it's in the metrics part, and you can actually disable this checkbox. And in there, we have the option now to choose one of the metrics. So if you just choose one, for example, the average time, second one, you now see, I show the average time everywhere, and now you can't choose anything. But if you put it on expression, we can type a manual expression here, which is interacting with a combo box, and then you'll get actually the setup we have here on the right. You see, which is very similar to the setup we have on our normal charts. And also for this, in everywhere in app 1, you will see that this is the new setup for our process graphs. So those are actually the features I wanted to show you for app 1, which we did apart from performance. But I also have some tips and tricks about performance, which we encountered during improving app 1. So one thing which we encountered when we have a big data set is if we have a dashboard where we have a nice size expression. So in here at this picture, I have a dashboard. I have a size expression where I look at this selector. Then I have the option in my overlays to use the size expression, for example, the size function. And this is actually a lot faster than if we repeat the same metric. The result technically is the same, but especially when the metric becomes a bit more complicated, for example, on an average, then this will make a huge impact on your application. So if possible, try to use your size expression as much as possible. The second tip I have is about the defaults for a selector. So the rendering of your dashboard is highly impacted by the amount of graphs or amount of bars it has to show. And yeah, this depends on actually the default of your selector. So what we did in app 1 is we made the defaults even smarter. So you can see at the bottom where we say like, oh, if the variant contains more than 500 different variants, then let's not use any default at all, just make it empty. This will greatly increase the waiting time for our end user. But be aware, we can do this like for default app 1, but if you have your own application, you actually have to think about what's my relevant default for my customers. So be aware that think about this, please, and set it up correctly for your own application. And I think those were the tips and tricks I had for you. Yes, then I now give the floor back to Martijn.
Yeah, thank you, Jasper. So by now we've seen that ProcessGold 18 outperforms its predecessors, and you've also seen some tips from Jasper to improve the performance of your apps as well. Now, question is, can we improve performance even further than that? And the answer is a definite yes. However, to make a big impact in the performance of your apps, you usually have to consider your functionality as well. Because when making a big change in performance, you often have to balance functionality against performance to do this. So when our customers ask us, can you help us make our app faster? The first question we usually ask is, what is your goal? What do your end users want to achieve with your app? Which insights are very important to them, which may be less important? And how often do they need these insights? Do they need them on a weekly basis or maybe less often? And those kinds of insights can really help you make the best performance improvements that you can. We basically have two strategies to do this. One we call optimization, the other we call data minimization. Now, optimizations are these small tweaks to your dashboards or expressions to squeeze out the last bits of performance. And you can use the profiler feature we made in ProcessGold 17 to do that. You might find that a particular chart on your dashboard is very slow. And then you can see, can I make it faster? Or maybe can I get rid of this particular chart to make my dashboard faster? Maybe I can put it on a separate tab to make that dashboard slow, but the other one faster, so you can make informed decisions. However, these kind of tweaks generally get you 10 or 20% of speed improvement, but not much more usually. For the big improvements, you really have to look at minimizing your data. The reason is quite simple. For all data analytics apps, not only ProcessGold, but all other tools have the same principle. You see the following rule: the more data you put in, the slower your app gets. And in ProcessGold, it's the number of records of the data set you're currently looking at that determines most of the performance. So often we're looking to really drastically minimize the number of records you put in your app to improve performance likewise. We have 4 ways to do this I want to show you today. One's called filtering, the other is sampling, we also have pre-aggregation, and finally sharding. I'll briefly touch upon those to give you an idea what you can do. So filtering is quite straightforward, and you're probably already doing that. Say you have data from 5 years of history in your system, then you might be only looking at the last year or maybe only the last month to make your whole data set a lot smaller. If your users are looking at your app on a weekly basis, maybe 4 weeks of data is enough for them to see the historical progression and still be able to do their job. You can also make 2 types of the data set. One with a short time period, which is very fast, which you use for your continuous monitoring, or maybe one with all the data you can use very infrequently, but to do a very long time historical analysis. Now, you can do filtering in different ways, because there might be creative ways to filter your data to focus on what people find really important. 2 months ago, we had a customer asking us, hey, can you help us improve our apps? We asked, hey, what's the goal of your end users? What do they want to achieve? Turned out they were really focused on improving the quality of that particular process, and they wanted to get rid of exceptions and handle those exceptions as best as possible. So we said, okay, shall we only look at the exceptions then? And we did. And it turned out that only 5% of the data was considered to be an exception. So by doing that simple filtering, we managed to improve the speed of performance a factor 20. So it was 20 times faster than before by doing that. Okay, the next technique to make a real improvement is called sampling. And it's not used a lot in process mining. It's used a lot in statistics. It's used by, for instance, Power BI to very extensively improve the speed of their apps. And the idea is very simple. If you have a set of cases, if you take only 10% of these cases, you have a 10% sample. Now, what sampling does very well is it helps you to draw general conclusions about what's happening. So you could say things like, in general, if my case goes through the QA department, a case takes 4 days longer. Or in general, if we have to do rework on this particular checking step, the cost of doing the whole case goes up by a factor 2. Now, the funny thing is, often in process mining, you're doing these general improvements on your process, so sampling would work quite fine over there. So that's sampling. Pre-aggregation is a bit different. Here's an example data set with office supplies that are being bought on a very detailed basis per product. But if you aggregate everything to a product category level, you end up with much less records. It's done a lot in BI. In process mining, it really depends on what kind of data you have, whether this is applicable. We often do it with events. Sometimes you have very detailed events, and you can just group sets of events together to make a more coarse view on your whole process. And finally, we have sharding. It's a unique feature of the ProcessGold platform, and say your organization is made up of several business units, and your data set also includes these business units. What you can do is shard your data set into these 10 business units and basically split up your data that way. And then if one person logs in, he will see only the appropriate unit for him. So the good thing is his personal shard is much faster than the whole data set, and he will be able to see only his unit. That's also the downside. He won't be able to see the rest of the business units. So often when we do something like this, people are happy with the speed improvement, but then we get the question, hey, our management still wants to see everything from the whole organization, which is really natural to ask. So we make something called a benchmark chart, and well, you could just accept that that's a lot slower than the normal charts, or you could employ one of the techniques we saw earlier to decrease the detail level of the benchmark chart, either by sampling or by filtering or by pre-aggregation. So in that way, you get best of both worlds. You have a very specific detailed data set, which is fast, but you can also look at the whole data set, but it's more coarse. I hope this gives you a bit of an idea what you can do to improve your the speed of your app. And again, all these techniques decrease the functionality to get more performance. But if you're creative and you know really well what's important to your users, most of the times you can employ these techniques to make really big steps. If you want to know more, we recently had a blog post about sharding on ProcessGold.com/big-data. It has a use case about sharding, and you can read more on the whole topic there. But also in the ProcessGold Academy, we have more and more topics about performance, which help you to do improvements. There are small optimizations there, but also these bigger strategies are there. We're updating that week by week, so more of them are coming in regularly. Of course, we also like to think with you on how to improve your app. So if you want to do performance improvements, please ask your ProcessGold contact or ask us via support@processgold.com, and we love to get creative with you and see what we can do. So I already mentioned the Academy just now, but there are more things new in there that I want to show you today. So of course, all the content has been updated to match the ProcessGold 18 software, but we also have a new section of how-tos for developers. They're kind of tutorials on different topics. For instance, the uses of icons. How do I deploy my app to end users? How do we add metrics in at one? It's a whole list of new topics. If you think it might be interesting for you, just check the new items out and see if there's anything which can help you. Now, there's one other thing which is not yet released, but is coming for the final ProcessGold 18 release, and that's an introduction video into ProcessGold. And what we saw in our trainings, that we often got the question of new users, something like, hey, what is this ProcessGold? What does it do? How does it help me? And we had some text, but we thought it would be much cooler to give you a video to make it easy for new people to get a feeling for what this is. So you have to wait a bit, but in 2 weeks, we'll have this new video available for you, and then you can show people inside your organization what ProcessGold is to help people understand what we do. Okay, so that was ProcessGold 18. Now let's look into the future. Of course, we started our performance initiative with 17. We made improvements there. We made improvements in 18. And what you haven't seen is that in the background, we have been working on several prototypes to really make a big step in improvement, in performance. And we're now working on a prototype for parallel chart calculation. But we're basically looking into how we're going to bring it to market. We're not sure if we are going to get it into the product or how fast we'll get it in there. So for ProcessGold 19, I hope to be able to tell you more about that. Then there are some events which are upcoming. Actually, Plug and Play in China is ongoing this week. It's in multiple cities in China, and it's a whole week of pitching process mining, and we're very proud to be there and yeah, be present there. Also next of coming up is in November is the ICT and Logistics Fair in the Netherlands. We are there with a partner of ours called Smart Analytics. And if you want to meet up there, meet us there, then please reach out to your ProcessGold contact and you can arrange a meeting with us. And then finally, this is, I think, our last item before we go to the question section. You know, we have our new layout engine called Tracy, and we have a patent pending because it's very novel technology. But it all started with a master's thesis with the theoretical groundwork and also some of the practical groundwork, and it was done by Robin Mannens. He got a 10 out of 10 for his master's thesis, which is really exceptional. But now he's also been nominated for TOE Thesis Award for the best master thesis of 2018, which is also very exceptional. So we're very proud of that, and congratulations to you, Robin, for making this. This is very cool. So now we're at our question section, and I've seen people in this room communicating with post-it notes to each other what the possible answers might be. So I'm excited to hear if you have any questions. Okay, so I'll at least take the first one. The question is, you showed several methods to improve the performance of an app, but you didn't really show how to do that in ProcessGold. Can you tell a bit more about that? Whether you're sampling or filtering or doing pre-aggregation, in a way you're filtering your records. And what we usually do is do as much filtering as possible in a connector, so the data set that enters your app is as small as possible, because then you have the biggest performance gain. And in the end, our sampling, for instance, is done with writing an expression to calculate the sampling, and then putting it in a join table, for instance. So with our expansion language, we define these kinds of filterings. The challenge usually isn't the technical one. The challenge is usually much more functional. Which things can I leave out and still have a good app? So often you just have to try it, open your data in the app, and see whether it works for you to see whether the end result is good. Okay, so what about real-time or quasi-real-time connections? How can we improve filtering there? Well, that's a very interesting question. I must say we can do quasi-real-time connections. So what we have is, if you open the app again, data can be loaded. So if you refresh, you load new data. Usually what we would try is make sure that the data that you load is filtered at the source. So the data entering the app is as small as possible, because especially these real-time data sets, they really can take up a lot of performance if you have to load a lot of data, initialize a lot of expressions as a result. So we're really careful to minimize it at the source.
I might join in for a second, Martijn. I think for a live data source, it's especially important to minimize your data, because every time when an end user opens your app, this will be reloaded. So your normal queries will have been executed up front, but your live data sets will be executed at that moment. So you want that set to be as small as possible.
Yeah. We have a question about the new moving clip coming up. I can't find it in the Academy. Where can I find it? You have to wait a bit. It will be there in 2 weeks. When you get a mail that the final release is available, then the release video will be there, or the video clip will be there as well. And a question about the release candidate. It's basically the same answer. That's nice. The release candidate is now available, and in 2 weeks we'll release the ProcessGold 18 final release. Great. So I think those are all of the questions for today. Thank you all for asking these questions and attending this webinar. And I hope to see you all again in 2 weeks. See you there, and happy mining. Bye.
Bye, thanks.